Good morning, students. How are you today? Today we're gonna start solving this equation. Negative cosine of theta over 2 equals negative cosine of theta. Number 12. I have written it in here, so we have enough space to solve. First thing we can do is for sure get rid of the negative, right? So we're gonna multiply both sides times -1. When we do that, this negative just goes away, right? And we have positive both sides, so it's a little bit easier. Now, after we do that, I just want to make sure, guys, that you don't have the temptation to multiply both sides times 2, because you cannot operate inside of the cosine where the angle is. That's not allowed. It would be a little bit you can justify it, okay, but right now it's just we can just justify it in here, right, and say, okay, if we make the double of the cosine of the angle, is it the double of the cosine? No, it's not. So we cannot multiply times 2 in here and expect that this is going to work. So again, you cannot do that, okay? So next thing that we're going to think of is, okay, we're going to use this formula worksheet, and then, okay, where do we find cosine of theta over 2, or a variable over 2? And here we find 1, right? Cosine of x over 2, and it's defined that way, so we could use that. But I'm gonna make a trick that I think is gonna make it a little bit easier for you, and that trick is gonna be, okay, let's do this. Let's define theta over 2. Let's define this as x, okay? If we define theta over 2 equal x, you will agree that if I just throw this 2 that way, this can also be written theta equals 2x, okay? Correct? Now, I'm gonna substitute, instead of writing theta over 2, I'm gonna substitute this by x and this over this by 2x. And again, you may be shocked now. That's okay, just wait until I finish the video, okay? So to see how this evolves. So now this cosine of x equals cosine of 2x, right? Now that I have this, I can use the identities, the double angle formulas, and for the cosine of 2 theta or 2x, I can rewrite this as 2 cosine squared. I'm trying to just write an equation with only cosines, okay? That's what I want to do. So again, cosine of theta equals, of 2 theta equals 2 cosine square of theta minus 1. So I'm going to write it in here. We have this identity. We have cosine of 2 theta equals 2 cosine square theta minus 1. Okay? Now, I can just substitute in here. Okay? So I have cosine of x equals 2 cosine square of x minus 1. Okay? Now, after I do this, you might not know it yet, but this is actually a quadratic equation. Okay? You might be shocked. Is this a quadratic equation? I think Mick is also shocked. I don't see a quadratic equation in here. Okay, Mick, just wait a second and let me do another trick, okay? And you will see. So I'm gonna just throw this to the other side, and now I here have a 0, which is the same. What I'm doing here, it's negative cosine of x, subtracting cosine of x both sides. Okay, that's what I'm doing. So 2 cosine square of x minus cosine of x minus 1. Correct? Great. Now, next step is I'm gonna do this trick here. I'm gonna define z as cosine of x. So I'm doing the same trick I did up here. and I'm doing it here, okay? So doing this trick, I can rewrite this equation as 0 equals 2z squared minus z minus 1. Okay, this is a quadratic equation. Now you see that this is a quadratic equation, and we can factor this quadratic equation. You can use what you learned last year, how to factor quadratic equations. Well, this has to be 2z here, and this has to be z, and then one numbers are gonna be what two numbers multiplying are gonna be -1, and that's only 1 and -1. So, and then I can try which one goes where, but I know that this will have to go here, so this is going to be a -2z, and when I add it to z, it's going to be -z. Okay. Again, if you want to use the quadratic formula for this, that's also right. So you go z equals minus b plus minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a, right? And you do negative, so that's +1 plus minus, and then b squared, which is 1 minus 4a times c, which is -1, over 2 times 2, and then this is this is 1 plus minus 1 plus, this is going to be 8 plus 8 over 4, and that makes it 1 plus minus, this is going to be 9, square root of 9 is 3 over 4, and then it's 1 plus 3, 4, oh, that's 1 solution, it's 1, and then 1 minus 3, that's -2, and that's -1/2, which is actually the same thing we're going to get here if we make this equal 0, right? And we just solve this equation. It's going to be 2z minus 1 and z minus 1/2, and here is going to be z equals 1. So that's exactly what we got in here, right? So are we done? No, we are not, because now we have to go back to where we did those definitions to solve those equations. So first thing we have to do now is, I got for z -1/2 and 1. That means that z can be 1 or -1/2. So now I have to solve this equation for 1 and for -1/2. So I have to do cosine, I'm going to use this color, cosine of x equals 1, and that's one equation, and then cosine of x equals -1/2, right? Okay, now if I use the unit circle for this, it's going to make it easier for me. If I use the unit circle, when is cosine 1? Well, cosine is 1. Cosine is 1 at 0, right? That's the or 360. And then so that's for this one. Cosine is 1 for 0 and 360. Okay, and then when it's -1/2, it's -1/2. Let's look here at 120, right? And at 240, right? So that means that for this one, the solutions for x are 120 and 240, right? Are we done? No, we are not. Now we have to go back to see how much is theta, knowing that x is, it can be 0, 360, 120, and 240. So we're going to go here, and we're going to just substitute, okay? So actually, we're doubling all these values. That means that if we put 0 here, we have to double it. Double of 0 is, so again, we're multiplying times 2, the 0, the 360, the 120, and the 240. And if we multiply all these times 2, what we're having is 0, 720, 240, and 480, right? Now, the problem says that they want all the solutions between 0 and 360, 360 not included. So that means that this solution and this solution are not going to be there. So the only solutions that remain are 0 and 240. And if you actually plug it in this equation, okay, actually if you put here 0, well, 0 in here, that's going to be 0 over 2, that's going to be 0. Cosine of 0 is 1, and it's going to, the same thing is going to happen on the other side. And if you put actually 240, which is the other answer, 240 over 2, it's 120, and we already saw the cosine of 120, it's negative 1/2, right? So that's going to work. And here it's also going to work because 240, it's also negative 1/2. So you're going to have then 1/2 equals 1/2. Okay? So it works. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.